The notebook fell from David's hands for the third time that morning. He picked it up from the dusty ground and stared at the massive creature resting 50 meters away. Ironwing had been in that exact spot for 6 days now, completely still except for the slow rise and fall of breathing. The dragon's scales caught the double sunlight and threw rainbow patterns across the observation post walls. David wrote another line in his research log. Day 2847 of close observation. Subject continues to show zero acknowledgement of human presence. He closed the notebook and rubbed his tired eyes. 20 years he had been studying the dragons of Ashford's Landing. 20 years of careful notes and recordings. 20 years of being invisible. His wife Laura appeared in the doorway, carrying their daughter Grace. The baby was 6 months old and making happy gurgling sounds. Laura smiled at him, but David could see the concern in her eyes. They had talked about this posting before Grace was born. Was it fair to raise a child on a world where the dominant species treated humans like empty air? Grace reached her tiny hands toward the window. Her eyes were fixed on Ironwing with the kind of focus babies sometimes showed toward bright objects. David walked over and kissed Laura's cheek. Still nothing. Laura asked. Same as always, David said. I don't know why I keep expecting something different. The dragons had been here long before humans arrived 200 years ago. They were called the Rendered Ones in the old colonial documents, though nobody knew why. They were massive beings with crystalline scales that hummed with strange frequencies. Human scientists had proven the dragons were intelligent. They had language and culture and built things in their own way. But they had never once responded to human attempts at communication. Not a single word. Not a single gesture. Nothing in 2 centuries. David took Grace from Laura's arms. The baby immediately started bouncing and reaching toward the window again. What do you see out there, little one? He asked softly. Grace made a long cooing sound. It was almost musical. David held her closer to the reinforced glass. Ironwing was truly magnificent up close. The dragon's head alone was the size of a small transport vehicle. Each scale looked carved from living gemstone. They probably think we're like insects, Laura said quietly. Too small and simple to bother with. David nodded. It was the prevailing theory. Humans could understand dragon behavior somewhat, but clearly dragons measured intelligence by standards humans didn't meet. The research teams had tried everything over the decades. Mathematics, music, art, even physical gifts left at dragon nesting sites. All ignored. Grace wiggled in his arms and made another sound. This one was different, higher pitched, almost like she was trying to mimic something. David wondered if babies could hear frequencies adults couldn't. He made a mental note to check the audio equipment. That was when Ironwing moved. The dragon's enormous head turned, slowly and deliberately. The motion was so unexpected that David actually stepped backward from the window. In 20 years, he had never seen a dragon turn a look at the observation post. They flew over it and nested near it and walked past it, but they never looked at it. Ironwing's eyes were the color of deep amber. They fixed directly on the window, directly at Grace. Did you see that? David's voice came out as a whisper. Laura was already at the equipment console, rewinding the video feeds. I saw it. I'm checking if the cameras caught it. David held Grace very still. The baby had gone quiet too, staring back at the dragon with wide eyes. For almost a full minute, nothing else happened. Then Ironwing's head tilted slightly to one side. It was an almost curious gesture. Grace laughed. The pure, delighted sound that babies make. She clapped her hands together and bounced in David's grip. That Ironwing scales shifted color slightly. A ripple of deeper blue ran across the dragon's neck. Then the great head turned away and settled back into resting position. David, Laura said from the console. Her voice was shaking. David, come look at this. He carried Grace over to the screens. Laura had pulled up the audio analysis. The visual showed sound waves from the last 5 minutes. Grace's cooing appeared as small green spikes. But there was something else. A larger pattern underneath in deep red. Dragon resonance frequencies that the human ear couldn't detect without equipment. Ironwing was vocalizing, Laura said. At the exact same time Grace made that first sound. I've never seen this in any of the archives. David felt his heart beating faster. Could be coincidence. Could be, Laura agreed. But neither of them believed it. Grace reached for the screen and babbled again. The audio equipment picked up another pulse of dragon resonance from outside. Fainter this time, but definitely there. We need to document everything, David said. He was already moving toward the main computer. Every sound she makes, every movement, whatever just happened, we need to understand it. Laura was recording new data streams. Should we report this to the Institute? David paused. What would he even say? A dragon glanced at my baby and maybe made a sound? After 200 years of silence, they would think he was seeing patterns in randomness, desperate for breakthrough after decades of failure. Let's wait, he said finally. Let's make sure we have something real first. Grace yawned and rubbed her eyes. She was getting sleepy. David held her against his shoulder and looked out at Ironwing one more time. The dragon appeared completely still again, completely indifferent. But David couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted. He didn't know yet that his daughter had just become the most important human in the galaxy. He didn't know that the silence between species was about to end. He only knew that for the first time in his career, a dragon had looked at a human and seen something worth noticing. Grace fell asleep in his arms, dreaming whatever babies dream, while outside, Ironwing kept watch through the long afternoon. The video had been watched 417 times. David knew because the computer kept count. 3 weeks had passed since that first moment, and the research team couldn't stop replaying the footage. Grace reaching toward the window, Ironwing turning to look. The matched audio frequencies that shouldn't exist. Grace was 8 months old now and could sit up by herself. She was currently on a soft mat in the observation room, playing with colored blocks. Laura sat nearby with a tablet recording every sound the baby made. David stood at the window watching Ironwing, who had not left the area since that day. Another team from the capital is coming tomorrow, Laura said without looking up from her notes. They want to run their own tests. David felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Other researchers had tried to recreate the interaction with different dragons. All of them had failed. Babies, children, even recordings of Grace's voice. Nothing worked. Only Grace herself seemed to trigger any response, and only from Ironwing. Grace dropped the block and it rolled toward the window. She crawled after it with determined focus. When she reached the glass, she pressed both hands against it and looked out at the dragon. "Da," she said loudly. The audio equipment registered a faint dragon frequency in response. "Every time," Laura whispered. "How is this possible?" David shook his head. He had stopped trying to explain it through normal science. Something about his daughter reached across a barrier that had stood for 2 centuries. Something the dragons recognized, even if humans didn't understand it. Grace slapped the window and made a long string of baby sounds. Then she said something that made both her parents freeze. "IQ." It was clear, unmistakable. Grace's first real word. Outside, Ironwing moved. The dragon rose to full height, scales blazing with reflected light. A deep thrumming sound filled the air. It was so powerful that the observation post shook. Equipment rattled on tables. David grabbed Laura's arm to steady her. The sound grew louder. It wasn't just Ironwing now. David ran to the other windows and felt his breath catch. Dragons were coming from all directions, flying in from the mountains and the valleys, landing in the open spaces around the research station. Dozens of them, maybe more. What's happening? Laura had scooped up Grace and backed toward the center of the room. Is this an attack? David didn't know. In all the records, dragons had never gathered like this. They were solitary creatures who kept to their own territories. Seeing more than 2 or 3 together was rare. But now there were at least 50 visible and more arriving every minute. Grace was completely calm in Laura's arms. She pointed at the window and said "Unku" again with absolute confidence. Ironwing moved closer to the observation post. The massive dragon positioned himself directly in front of the main entrance. His wings spread wide in a posture David had only seen in protective behavior near nests. "He's shielding us," David said slowly. "I think he's protecting the building." Laura stared at him. "From what?" "From them." David pointed at the other dragons. He's keeping them back. The comm system crackled to life. It was the station director, voice tight with barely controlled panic. All personnel to safe rooms immediately. We have a dragon event of unknown nature. This is not a drill. David grabbed the comm director. Wait. I don't think they're hostile. I think they're responding to my daughter. There was a long pause. What are you talking about? Grace said her first word. The dragons reacted. Ironwing is in a protective stance. Another voice came through, one of the senior researchers. David, we're reading massive resonance pulses across all frequencies. Every dragon on the continent might be responding to this. Grace wiggled in Laura's arms and reached toward the window again. She was smiling. To her, this was just another interesting day. She had no idea she was at the center of the most significant moment in human-dragon relations ever recorded. David made a decision that was probably crazy. He walked to the environmental controls and opened the external audio system. Grace's babbling and words would now be broadcast outside. Laura started to protest, but he held up a hand. If this is first contact, he said quietly, then we need to let it happen. Grace heard her own voice echoing back through the speakers. She thought this was hilarious and started making more sounds. Baby gibberish mixed with attempts at words. The audio equipment showed dragon frequencies rising and falling in patterns that almost seemed like responses. Then Ironwing did something impossible. The dragon's resonance changed. It came through the station's translation equipment as fragmented words. Human words processed through dragon frequencies. The voice was deep and multi-layered but understandable. Small one, sees true. We hear. Laura nearly dropped Grace. David grabbed onto the console for support. In 200 years of human presence, no dragon had ever spoken. Ever. The translation equipment was designed more as wishful thinking than practical tool. But now it was working that Ironwing's next words came clearer. We will speak now. The other dragons settled into resting positions. The aggressive energy in the air faded into something else. Waiting. Attention. David realized with absolute certainty that every dragon present was focused on this building. On his daughter. Grace, oblivious to the weight of the moment, yawned. It was getting close to her nap time. She rubbed her eyes with tiny fists and made a cranky sound. Even the most important moment in human history had to work around an 8-month-old's sleep schedule. David started laughing. He couldn't help it. The absurdity and wonder of it all overwhelmed him. Laura joined in, tears running down her face. They held each other and their daughter while outside a civilization that had ignored humanity for centuries waited to see what would happen next. Ironwing's voice came through again. The small one shows what you are. Unfinished. Open. True. David didn't understand. Not yet. But he knew they had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. His little girl who just wanted her blocks and her nap had somehow become a bridge between worlds. Grace fell asleep against Laura's shoulder, completely exhausted by being the center of galactic attention. Outside, 50 dragons maintained their vigil as the sun set over Ashford's Landing, painting the sky in colors that matched their scales. The smell of fresh bread filled the small kitchen. Grace sat in her high chair, mashing banana between her fingers while a galactic news crew waited outside the family quarters. She was 2 years old now and completely unimpressed by fame. David watched his daughter create art with breakfast food and tried to remember what normal life felt like that Ashford's Landing had transformed. What was once a quiet research colony now hosted delegates from every major human government and scientific institution. Ships arrived daily, bringing linguists and diplomats, and people who wanted to be part of history. All because a toddler had called a dragon uncle. Laura came in holding a datapad with the day's schedule. We have the university researchers at 9, the cultural exchange program 11, and Ironwing asked if Grace could visit this afternoon. Asked, David repeated. The word still felt strange. Dragons asking for things. Dragons having conversations. The world had changed so fast. Grace looked up from her banana masterpiece. Uncle Wing. Her pronunciation was getting better, but she still shortened Ironwing's name in the way small children did with complicated words. Yes, sweetie. Uncle Wing wants to see you later. Grace clapped her hands together, spraying banana bits across the table. Yay! Through the window, David could see 3 dragons resting in the commons area. This was normal now. Dragons came and went from the colony freely, though most still preferred to interact only with Grace. A few had begun limited conversations with researchers, but always about her. Always asking questions about the small human who had seen them as family. The door chimed. David checked the security screen and saw an elderly dragon settling into the larger receiving area they had built last year. Skybreaker had arrived early. The Dragon Elder made the trip from the northern ranges once a month to assess what Skybreaker called the shift. David let the dragon's translated words fill the room. Good morning, David Chun. Is the small one well? Grace is fine, honored elder. She's finishing breakfast. May I enter the family space? I bring important words. Laura and David exchanged glances. Dragons rarely asked to enter human homes. The spaces were too small for their size. But they quickly rearranged furniture and opened the reinforced patio doors wide. Skybreaker's head and long neck extended into the room while the rest of the dragon's body remained outside. Grace squealed with delight. Sky! Sky! She held up her banana-covered hands like an offering. Skybreaker's scales rippled with colors that researchers had learned to interpret as amusement. Greetings, small one. You wear your food well. Laura cleaned Grace's hands while David waited for Skybreaker to explain the visit. The elder dragon had never come to their home before. Official meetings happened at the Institute or Neutral Ground. I have spoken with the Council of Rendered Ones, Skybreaker began. The translation gave the dragon's voice a formal weight. We have reached understanding about the small one. About Grace. David felt his protective instincts rise. What kind of understanding? Patience, young father. This is not threat, but truth. Skybreaker's great eyes focused on Grace, who was now trying to climb out of her high chair. For 200 of your years, we did not speak to humans. Do you know why? We theorized you didn't consider us intelligent enough, Laura said carefully. No, we knew your minds were quick and clever. We watched you build and learn and change things. But we did not see you as alive, not in the way we measure life. The words hit like physical blows. David struggled to process them. You thought we were what? Machines? Not machines. Something between. Moving and thinking, but not rendered. Not showing true self. Every adult human we observed held themselves behind walls. You speak words that mean different things than your intentions. You hide and calculate and perform versions of yourselves. We could not see your cores. Therefore, you were not fully real to us. Laura sat down heavily. But children are different. The very small ones, yes. Before you teach them to hide. Grace shows herself without barriers. When she feels joy, she shows joy. When she feels fear, she shows fear. She called Ironwing Uncle because she felt kinship and spoke it without filters or doubts. This is what we call rendering. Being completely and honestly yourself. Grace had gotten free of the high chair and toddled over to Skybreaker. She patted the dragon's scaled snout with complete trust. Sky nice. Yes, small one. Sky is nice to you. The dragon's tone carried warmth that the translation software struggled to capture fully. David's mind raced through the implications. So when we grow up and learn social rules, learn to be polite or diplomatic or careful with our words, we become less real to you. You become harder to know. But Grace has shown us something unexpected. By rendering herself to Iron Wing, by being completely honest in her bond, she opened a path. We began to wonder if adult humans also had rendered cores hidden beneath the performing selves. We began to listen differently. Laura leaned forward. And what did you find? We found that some of you can still render. It is difficult. It requires you to remove all the layers you have built. But it is possible. David Chun, when you held Grace that first day and felt wonder and fear and love all together, we felt that. It reached us. Laura Chun, when you protected your child while being terrified of unknown danger, that was rendering. True and complete in the moment. Grace climbed into Laura's lap, getting sleepy from all the excitement. David watched his daughter yawn and felt the weight of what Skybreaker was really saying. You're telling us that humans can be real to you, but we have to be vulnerable, completely honest. No social masks or careful words. Yes, this is why Grace is precious. She has remained rendered while growing in understanding. She bridges both ways of being. The council has decided to name her rendered kin. She will be the first human given this designation. She belongs to dragons as much as to humans now. David started to protest, but Laura touched his arm. She looked at Grace, who was nearly asleep, peaceful and trusting. Their daughter, who had always been exactly herself without apology or performance. Maybe this wasn't burden, but recognition of what she already was. What does rendered kin mean exactly? David asked. It means we will protect her as our own. It means she will learn our ways as she grows. It means when the time comes, she will teach your people what she knows of rendering. She will be the bridge. Bridges bear weight from both sides. This is our offering and our asking. Grace's eyes drifted closed. David looked at his sleeping daughter and wondered what kind of future they had just accepted for her. Rain drummed against the classroom windows. Grace sat at her desk, practicing resonance frequencies while her human classmates worked on mathematics. She was 7 years old and living 2 lives. 3 days a week, she attended regular school. The other days, she trained with dragons. Sometimes she wasn't sure which world felt more natural anymore. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was explaining fractions when Grace felt a familiar vibration in her chest. Dragon resonance, close and urgent. She raised her hand. May I be excused? Ironwing is calling. Mrs. Patterson had learned to recognize that distant look. Go ahead, dear. Take your communicator. Grace grabbed her bag and ran outside. The rain soaked her immediately, but she didn't care. Ironwing landed in the school courtyard, scales streaming water. Other children pressed against the windows to watch. Dragon visits to school had become almost routine over the years. Uncle Wing, what's wrong? Ironwing's translated voice came through her communicator device. Emergency on the colony world named Brightwater. Crystalline meteor storm approaching. 3,000 humans in danger. Your father wants the council to help. Grace had heard about Brightwater. It was a farming colony 2 systems away. Good people growing food for other worlds. Can dragons stop meteor storms? We can divert them. Shift the crystalline patterns before they solidify into destructive forms. But we never have before. Why not? Grace was already walking toward the landing pad where her parents worked. Ironwing moved alongside her, wings folded against the rain. Because we did not know humans needed help. We thought your deaths were like our transformations. Natural changes from one state to another. We did not understand permanence of your ending. Grace stopped walking. Water ran down her face, and she wasn't sure if it was all from rain. You didn't know we actually die? Forever die. We live for thousands of years. When we change form, it is transformation, not termination. We assume the same for you. Small one, we did not understand that when humans end, they are gone completely. No continuation. No return. Grace felt something cold settle in her stomach. All those years of silence. All those times humans had died in accidents or disasters while dragons watched. They hadn't been cruel. They had been ignorant. How many people are on Brightwater? 3,072. And if the meteors hit, all will end. What you call death. Grace started running. Ironwing lifted into the air and flew beside her. She burst into the research institute where her parents were in an emergency meeting with dragon representatives and human officials. Everyone turned to look at her. David came over immediately. Grace, you should be in school. Ironwing told me about Brightwater. We have to help them. Skybreaker's massive form dominated one side of the conference room. The council debates this now, small one. We have never intervened in human difficulties before. Grace walked right up to the dragon elder. Her shoes squeaked on the floor, leaving wet tracks. You never helped because you didn't know he needed it. But you know now. You know what death means for us. You know 3,000 people will be gone forever if you don't act. A dragon named Stormcaller spoke through the translation system. This sets precedent. If we help once, are we required to help always? Do we become responsible for all human survival? We're not asking you to be responsible for everything, Laura said firmly. We're asking you to help prevent a tragedy when you have the power to do so. Grace looked up at Skybreaker. Can I ask you something? It might be rude. Truth between kin is never rude, small one. When you thought our deaths were transformations, did you watch them happen? Did you see us end and feel nothing? Skybreaker's scales shifted to darker colors. Yes, we witnessed many human endings over the centuries. We observed with curiosity, but not concern. And now that you know the truth, now that you understand what death really means for us, how does that make you feel? The dragon was quiet for a long moment. Rain continued to hammer the building roof. Finally, Skybreaker spoke in tones the translation system marked as distress. We feel horror. We feel guilt for ignorance. If we had known, we would have changed everything. We did not mean to be cruel through our misunderstanding. Grace nodded. Then help us now. Help Brightwater. You can't fix the past, but you can change what happens next. Another elder, Earthshaper, moved forward. The small one renders truth to us again. She cuts through our debate to the core question. We know now what death means. We cannot unknow it. To watch humans end, when we could prevent, it would be choosing cruelty. The council will help Brightwater. The room erupted in motion. Human coordinators started making calls. Dragons began departure preparations. Within an hour, 12 dragons capable of long-distance flight were heading to Brightwater, carrying human technical advisors. The crystalline meteor storm was 18 hours from impact. They would arrive with 6 hours to spare. Grace sat in her father's office watching the tracking screens. Laura brought her dry clothes and hot soup. Ironwing rested outside the window, keeping vigil. You did well today, David said quietly. You made them see what was right. I just asked Uncle Skybreaker to feel his feelings, Grace said. Dragons are really good at being honest once they admit they have feelings about something. Laura smiled, despite her worry. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I just know that Uncle Wing and Uncle Sky love me, and people who love you don't let bad things happen when they can stop them. Through the night, they waited. Grace fell asleep in a chair, with Ironwing's resonance humming through the walls like a lullaby. When dawn came, the news arrived. The dragons had successfully diverted the meteor storm. Brightwater was safe. 3,072 people would wake up tomorrow with no idea how close they had come to ending. David carried Grace to bed and tucked her in. She mumbled in her sleep, still clutching her communicator. On the screen, messages poured in from Brightwater. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ironwing's voice came through quiet and thoughtful. The small one asked what else we do not know about each other. This question will haunt us. What other assumptions have we made? What other truths have we missed? David looked out at the dragon. I think that's a question we'll be answering together for a very long time. Yes, Ironwing agreed. And we will be better for asking it. The bullet missed Grace by centimeters. Glass exploded inward from the conference room window, and she hit the floor on pure instinct. Screaming erupted around her. Security alarms blared. Ironwing's roar shook the entire building as the dragon smashed through the wall to reach her. Grace was 17. She had been giving a speech about mutual rendering at the Galactic Unity Summit when someone tried to kill her. Ironwing's massive body curled around her protectively while guards rushed toward the broken window. Her ears rang from the gunshot. Her hand shook. I am here, small one. You are safe. Ironwing's resonance wrapped around her like a shield. More dragons landed outside, responding to his distress call. David and Laura fought through the panicked crowd to reach her. Her mother pulled her close while her father checked her for injuries. Grace could hear him talking, but the words seemed far away. All she could think about was the certainty that someone wanted her dead. Security caught the shooter within minutes. A human woman named Patricia Williams, member of a group called the Pure Sovereignty. They believed dragon influence had corrupted humanity's independence. They wanted humans to stand alone again, unhelped and unguided by alien beings. Grace was their primary target, the symbol of everything they hated. The summit was evacuated. Grace sat in a secure room with her parents and Ironwing, who had refused to leave her side. News reports showed that the Untouched Circle, a faction of dragons who opposed speaking to humans, had issued a statement supporting the attack. They called Grace a corruption, a bridge that should never have been built. Both sides want me gone, Grace said quietly. Her voice didn't shake anymore, but something inside her felt cracked. Humans who hate dragons and dragons who hate humans. I'm the enemy to everyone who wants to stay separate. Ironwing made a low rumbling sound. You are kin to those who matter. The others drown in their own fear. 3 days later, Grace stood before the Reform Summit. Security had been tripled. Armed guards lined every wall. Dragons and humans who supported integration sat together in mixed groups. Those who opposed it had mostly left. Grace was supposed to read a prepared statement. Words carefully crafted by diplomats and advisors. Safe words that wouldn't upset anyone further. She looked down at the speech and made a decision. She put it aside. I'm going to render myself to all of you right now, she said. Complete truth with no shields. She felt Ironwing's resonance join hers, supporting her. Other dragons in the room added their voices. The combined frequency made the air vibrate. Grace closed her eyes and let everything she normally kept controlled pour out. She showed them her fear. The terror of the assassination attempt. The nightmare she had been having. The weight of being 17 and responsible for galactic unity. She showed them her doubt. The time she wondered if the bridge she represented was worth the cost. The loneliness of belonging fully to neither humans nor dragons. She showed them her resentment. Anger at being special when all she wanted was normal. Frustration at humans who expected her to fix everything. Bitterness toward dragons who treated her like a curiosity instead of a person. But she also showed them her love. The fierce protective bond with Ironwing who had become more family than friend. The pride she felt when humans and dragons worked together successfully. The hope that maybe, despite everything, the future could be better than the past. When she finished, silence filled the room. Then something unprecedented happened. Humans began to render themselves. Awkwardly at first. People standing and speaking their raw truths without diplomatic language. A scientist admitted she still feared dragons despite working with them daily. A politician confessed he supported integration more for career advantage than belief. A teacher revealed she resented Grace for making her job harder. Dragons responded with their own renderings. Stormcaller admitted uncertainty about whether speaking to humans had been wise. Earthshaper confessed to missing the simplicity of the silent centuries. Skybreaker revealed fear that dragons had changed too much and could never go back to what they were. The honesty was brutal, painful, but real in a way diplomatic speeches never were. Grace watched years of careful political language crumble as people chose truth over comfort. That was when the pure sovereignty attacked. Not just one shooter this time. They had planned a full assault. Explosives. Weapons designed to disrupt dragon resonance. The goal was to destroy the summit and everyone in it. Grace heard the first explosion and saw Ironwing move to shield her. But she was faster. She had been training in resonance for 17 years. She released a pulse that every dragon in the building felt. A call for united defense. The response was immediate. Dragons and humans moved together. Young humans who had learned dragon ways joined the counterattack. The resonance they created together disrupted the pure sovereignty's weapons. Security forces caught the attackers within minutes, but Ironwing had been hit. A resonance disruptor had caught him in the chest during the first moments of the attack. The dragon collapsed, scales flickering with unstable energy patterns. Grace dropped beside him. Uncle Wing, stay with me. Please stay with me. Ironwing's voice came weak through her communicator. Proud of you, small one. You rendered truth when it was hardest. You are everything we hoped you would become. Skybreaker landed beside them. The wound is deep. By our standards, this is fatal. He has perhaps a century remaining. A century sounded like a long time to humans. To a dragon who should live 10,000 years, it was nothing. Grace looked at the being who had protected her since infancy, who had been the first to see her as real, who had called her kin when the concept was brand new. No, she said firmly. I'm not accepting this. There has to be a way to heal him. Dragon healing cannot reverse resonance disruption. Skybreaker said gently. Grace stood up. Her face was set with determination that reminded David of her toddler years when she decided she wanted something. Then we'll find another way. Human medicine combined with dragon knowledge. We've been building bridges for years. Let's build one that saves him. Ironwing's scales pulsed with faint amusement. Still so fierce. Still rendering your absolute will. Always Uncle Wing. I learned from the best. The summit ended early, but not in defeat. It ended with purpose. Grace had shown that rendering truth could withstand attack. That honesty was stronger than hate. And now she would prove that bridges could carry healing too. The hybrid medical bay glowed with soft light from both human monitors and dragon crystal arrays. Grace sat beside Ironwing's resting form and reviewed the procedure notes for the 100th time. She was 25 now, and the last 8 years had been devoted to this moment. Finding a way to heal what should have been unhealable, Ironwing had weakened slowly over those years. The resonance disruptor had damaged something fundamental in his core. Human doctors and dragon healers had worked together to understand the injury, but no one had found a solution. Until 3 months ago, when a research team discovered something unexpected. Human cellular regeneration technology could be adapted to dragon crystalline structure. Maybe the procedure had never been tested. It would require Ironwing to render himself completely to human medical staff, to show his absolute vulnerability to beings who were still strange to most dragons, to trust in a way his kind had never trusted before. Grace held Ironwing's foreclaw gently. You don't have to do this, Uncle Wing. If you would rather live out your time naturally, I understand. Ironwing's scales had lost some of their brightness over the years. His voice through the translator was quieter than it used to be. I have watched you build bridges for 2 decades, small one. You have rendered yourself to both our peoples so many times. Let me render to yours now. Let me trust as you have trusted. The medical team assembled. Human doctors who had trained in dragon physiology. Dragon healers who had learned human techniques. It was the most comprehensive example of cooperation ever attempted. David and Laura stood in the observation room with Skybreaker and other dragon elders. Everyone was there. The procedure began. Ironwing had to remain conscious for it to work. He had to actively maintain his rendering, showing his true self without barriers while humans worked on his damaged core. Grace stayed at his side through all of it, adding her resonance to his, helping him maintain the vulnerability. She saw everything. The pain he carried from the injury. The fear he held about dying before his natural time. The love he felt for her and for the humans who had become his unlikely family. The doubt that sometimes crept in about whether speaking to humans had been the right choice. The certainty that knowing Grace had been worth everything. Hours passed. The medical team worked with intense precision. Human technology knitted with dragon healing in ways that created something entirely new. When it was finally done, Ironwing's resonance patterns had stabilized. The damage was reversed. He would live his full span of thousands of years. Grace hugged his massive head and cried. Relief and joy poured out of her in ways she hadn't let herself feel while the outcome was uncertain. Ironwing hummed softly, wrapping her in his resonance like he had when she was an infant learning to make her first sounds. 2 months later, Grace stood at the spaceport looking at her new ship. The rendered truth was built for a mixed crew. Spaces for both humans and dragons. Equipment that worked for both species. It was designed for deep galaxy exploration beyond charted territories. She would lead the first truly integrated crew into the unknown. Her parents came to see her off. David hugged her tight. I can't believe my little girl who used to mash bananas on the table is commanding a starship. I'm still that little girl sometimes, Grace admitted. I just learned to render in more complicated situations. Laura pressed a small box in her hands. From your first day of school. I saved it all these years. Grace opened it and found a drawing she had made at age 5. A stick figure child holding hands with a large blue shape. Underneath in messy letters it said, "Me and Uncle Wing." She smiled and tucked it carefully into her bag. Ironwing was already aboard the ship. He had chosen to be part of the crew despite the dangers of exploration. When Grace asked why, he simply said that he had protected her this long and wasn't stopping now. Skybreaker arrived with a delegation of elders. The ancient dragon had become one of Grace's closest mentors over the years. Small one, you carry more than yourself into the galaxy now. You carry the proof that rendering works. That truth can build what fear would destroy. I'm just Grace, she said. I'm not a symbol or a bridge or anything special. I'm just someone who thinks families should stick together regardless of species. That is exactly why you are special, Skybreaker replied. You never stopped being the child who saw a dragon and thought uncle. You remained rendered even as you grew. This is the rarest thing. The pure sovereignty had dissolved over the years. Most of its members had eventually chosen to experience rendering themselves. Some remained separate but peaceful. The untouched circle still existed, dragons who refused contact with humans, but they had ceased violent opposition. The galaxy had learned that fear could be transformed through understanding, though some would always choose to stay afraid. Grace boarded the ship and took her position. Through the view screen, she could see Ashford's landing stretching below. The research station where baby Grace had first reached for Ironwing was now a historical site. School children visited it to learn about the beginning of everything. The crew was ready. 15 humans and 8 dragons, all trained in mutual rendering, all willing to explore together. Ironwing settled into his position, and his resonance filled the ship like a welcoming song. Ready to see what's out there, Uncle Wing? Grace asked. With you, small one? Always ready. The rendered truth lifted from the spaceport and turned toward deep space. On its hull, human writing and dragon resonance patterns spelled out the same message in both languages. A reminder of what they had learned. A promise of what they could become. Grace looked back one last time at the world where it had all started. Where a baby had seen a dragon and felt love instead of fear. Where first words had changed everything. Then she turned forward toward the unknown and gave the order to jump to faster than light speed. Behind them, on Ashford's landing, David and Laura watched their daughter's ship disappear into the stars. Skybreaker stood with them, ancient and wise and still learning. Do you think she knows how much she changed the universe? Laura asked quietly that Skybreaker's scales rippled with warm colors. She knows she called a dragon uncle, and he answered. For her, that was always enough. The ship was gone now, carrying its rendered crew toward discoveries that would take decades to complete. But Grace had been right all along. The most important discovery had already been made. Family was not about species or language or how you were born. It was about seeing someone truly and choosing to say, I know you, and I love you, and you are mine. That truth would light the galaxy long after Grace and Ironwing had become legend. Long after the last word of their story had been told. Because some truths, once rendered, could never be unspoken. And somewhere in the deep dark between stars, a young woman and an ancient dragon flew together toward tomorrow, just as they had always been meant to do.